Hi, this is Frank Schaefer, and I want to thank you for sharing my YouTube videos and for watching them. And I would ask you, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It helps what I'm doing and get the word out. Thank you. Hi, my name is Frank Schaefer, and this is my commentary. It has to be said. And today I want to talk about the man behind the end of Roe v. Wade, the man behind the sudden turn of the Supreme Court to the far right. The man who I think is the most dangerous person in America, second only to Donald Trump, and perhaps closely followed by Elon Musk. And I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to rely heavily on an article by someone who I've had some communication with, one of the great columnists of our time, Thomas B. Edsall, who writes the most precise, exact pieces for the New York Times of any of their columnists. And the reason I'm going to do this is because in this piece, there is information that the future history of America hinges on exposing. So forgive me that this commentary is going to involve quite a bit of reading from a column, but believe me, I'm doing this because if you simply reprint a column as a blog, or you send it out to all your friends and you give them the link, for one thing, the New York Times subscription paywall makes it hard for people to log on and read. And I'm sharing this with you and reading out loud about someone that you have to know about for a lot of reasons. One, because the very fact that one man can accumulate this kind of power in America is amazing. The other is it helps you understand why the Supreme Court, for instance, voted to make sure that Donald Trump could not be prosecuted for his crimes, where those prosecutions and convictions would be overturned, and protected him and raised him up above the law. It doesn't seem rational for the court to do this, but rationality has nothing to do with this. What is behind the Supreme Court right now is fanatical religion, fanatical Roman Catholicism on a level that has not existed in the Western world since the 16th century in France, when the Roman Catholics insisted on using military force to push down the Protestant Reformation and slaughter Protestants by the tens of thousands in a French Civil War. I know that doesn't seem like it has anything to do with American history right now, but it does. So this piece by Thomas Edsall is called "The Man Behind the End of Roe v. Wade Has Big Plans for America," September 18, 2024, New York Times. And I'm going to read something from this to you. In the world of political fundraising, there is hard money, soft money, dark money, and Leonard Leo money. Political advocacy and charitable groups controlled by Leo now have, listen to this, far more assets than the combined total cash on hand of the Republican and Democratic National, Congressional, and Senatorial committees. 440.9 million. Leo is a 58-year-old graduate of Cornell Law School, a devout Catholic with ties to Opus Dei. This isn't in the article, I'm adding this. The secretive organization founded and that comes out of the history of the Spanish Civil War, when Francisco Franco, fascist dictator and ally of Adolf Hitler, used Opus Dei to gather the most conservative right-wing fascist Catholics in an organization to persecute, execute, murder those who opposed him. Okay, that's me talking. Back to the article now. The most conservative personal prelature in the church hierarchy, chief strategist of the Federalist Society for more than a quarter century, a crucial force behind the confirmation of John Roberts, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, has emerged over the past 5 years as the dominant fundraiser on the right. As he has risen to this pinnacle of influence, Leo has become rich, profiting both from the organizations he has created and from the consulting fees paid by the conservative advocacy and lobbying groups he funds. And I just want to add something. As someone who came out of the religious right myself, the son of Francis Schaeffer, the theologian and evangelist who joined with Roman Catholics in the 1970s to begin to formulate the evangelical anti-abortion response, along with C. Everett Koop, the Surgeon General of the United States under Ronald Reagan. We worked at that time with the people who basically began the process that has now made Leo rich. And like so many of the evangelical leaders we worked with, like Pat Robertson, who became a billionaire, finally owning a majority share in a diamond mine in South Africa, having accrued that money by getting people to send him $25 to save America. Right-wing leaders, and this is not the article, this is me talking, of whom I knew personally, in the Federalist Society, in the Heritage Foundation, all have one thing in common. They are fanatics, but they get rich, like Trump does, pitching themselves, taking money, perhaps stealing money, appropriating money, hiring family members. It's part of the parcel. These right-wing leaders make sure they enrich themselves from their, quote, leadership, which also is a venture in personal greed. That's not in the article. That's me talking about it. Okay, back to the article. Leo has an overarching agenda. In a 2022 speech he made upon receiving the John Paul II New Evangelization Award at the Catholic Information Center, Leo warned fellow Catholics, quote, this is quoting Leo now, Catholic evangelization faces extraordinary threats and hurdles. Our culture is more hateful and intolerant of Catholicism than at any other point in our lives. It despises who we are, what we profess, and how we act. End quote. Leo describes the adversaries of Catholicism as, quote, this is him again, these barbarians, that's you and me if we're not right-wing Catholic members of Opus Dei, that was founded by Francisco Franco to hound any enemy of his fascist drive for power in Spain. That's me talking again. These barbarians, that's us, secularists, that's me, and bigots, that's everybody who's not voting for Donald Trump, who have been growing more numerous over the past few years. They control and use many levers of power, end quote. Leo is determined to wrest the levers of power from the, quote, the grasp of liberals and restore them permanently, if possible, to what he sees as their rightful owner. Note, social and economic conservatives, i.e. the most fanatical Roman Catholics and evangelicals and Pentecostal Christians like him, helped by people like Elon Musk who don't want to be controlled by any state or federal agency. They just want to make money. They just want to have power. And this is the alliance Leo seeks. Now, back to what I'm quoting. Leo has most famously used his network and personal influence to establish a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court and win appointment of deeply conservative justices throughout the federal and state court systems. Okay, now I'm not reading. That has been a 50-year project, and my dad, Francis Schaeffer, and I, with C. Everett Koop, Ronald Reagan, and other presidential and senatorial leaders over the years, helped bring the evangelical right into the movement that put Donald Trump in power. And of course, Leo and his henchmen see Trump as a tool, which is why Leo's prodigy have ruled in the Supreme Court that if Trump does anything in an official action as president in the next presidency, if he's reelected, then he can skate past the law, including and up to having people killed, arrested, persecuted, all things he's threatened to do to people like you and me who are not his supporters, let alone leaders like Joe Biden and others. This is not fantasy. This is the program. Back to the article. Again, an unusual thing for me to read something, but you've got to know about this. And Thomas Edsall is a hero for doing his research. And by the way, he's not a liberal. He's an academic that criticizes the left very much in his writing sometimes. He is just a true reporter, philosopher king, if you like, someone who really looks at our situation. Back to his article. At the same time, Leo has provided essential support to the full gamut of right-wing advocacy and lobbying organizations, including the Federalist Society, Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, and the Faith and Freedom Coalition. All of these in alliance with far-right, often very delusional evangelical and Pentecostal Christians who are at heart conspiracists now, with QAnon and all the rest, which Leonard Leo is not, but he is using them as are his appointees, I'll call them that, his appointees on the Supreme Court, who have conspired, by the way, we now know for sure, with Roberts as the head of the court, conspired to basically enforce Leonard Leo's ideas, and that is make Trump above the law so he can do anything he wants. To do what? Push the agenda of the far Catholic right. Not all Catholics. Most Catholics find Leo and his ilk abhorrent, just like most Protestant Christians are not far-right evangelical Pentecostal Christians. just like most Republicans, when you take a poll, are not rabidly anti-choice, rabidly anti-woman, pro-bro culture, pro-rape, and saying to someone like Taylor Swift, I will give you a child. Most people abhor this. So Leo and his kind, this is me talking, not the article, depend on a new apartheid enforced from the top by people like Leonard Leo and his money through secretive organizations like Opus Dei, semi-secretive organizations like the Heritage Foundation, semi-secret organizations like the Federalist Society that operate openly, but in alliance with people that they never talk about, that they don't want to advertise are giving them the money and the power, who have not just infiltrated, but now control the Supreme Court and much of the federal judiciary. Okay, back to the article. The millions of dollars Leo has raised through his tax-exempt nonprofit have in turn, flowed to profit-making consulting companies. Note this, profit-making consulting companies owned in part or wholly by Leo, of course, and all the fascists around Franco, who were also part of Opus Dei back in the 1920s and 30s, also made out like bandits, as did many of the German fascists by reappropriating the land and the art and the money and the factories stolen from Jewish entrepreneurs and industrialists. These guys always have a habit of making the money off the system they are crushing and making sure that they put themselves in a driver's seat position. Much, by the way, as Elon Musk has profited more than any other business person in history, with the possible exception of Henry Ford, who, by the way, was an anti-Semite, from the US government. Ford did it through military contracts, so is Musk. And at the same time, turn around, bite the hand that feeds them, in Musk's case, trying to make America back into the image of the apartheid state of South Africa he grew up in with a silver spoon in his mouth, where he enriches himself through his contracts, the money he's gotten for Tesla, his space program that he's taken over in SSG and taken from NASA and privatized through, and then Starlink, his communication empire. This is the model, and Leo does it in a smaller way by simply enriching himself through his consulting firms. In 2016, Leo created BH Group, a for-profit consulting firm that is now defunct, which received at least 6.9 million from tax-exempt donor nonprofits run by Leo. So in addition to everything else, this is what we know. Now, the rest of the article goes on and talks in detail, quoting people about what the fund has done, who they have given to, how they manipulated the Supreme Court, how they put the justices in power. This is not hearsay, this is fact. And what we have in the article here in the New York Times, a very long exposition of Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, their Project 2025, things you've heard about. But you have to understand, one person has become very rich doing this, and he is a fanatic, and he is off the chart. He does not, I repeat, represent the Roman Catholic Church. He represents a sliver of fanaticism of the Roman Catholic Church that has perverted its own teaching all the way back in history into the Middle Ages and before that. There have been these two threads in Roman Catholicism, in case you want to know my opinion. And that is the thread of Francis Assisi and the others who basically talked about taking care of the poor and helping. That's why we have so many hospitals with Roman Catholic saints' names on them. God bless them. Thank you. Thank you to the nuns. Thank you to the priests. Thank you to the others who have done this. But there's this other thread, and that is it's all about power. It's all about popes using their armies to crush European monarchies that weren't in agreement with them. It's one civil war in Europe after another in which Roman Catholics have pitted themselves against the Reformation, against others, free thinkers, against science. It's why the Medici had to defend Galileo Galilei and protect him from the Roman Catholic Church. That too is part of history. Am I picking on the Catholics? No, it's part of all of our histories. It's the same thing as saying, let's recognize that a big chunk of American wealth was built on the slave states and that we appropriated Native Americans' land. I'm sorry, we're all in the same boat, but what's the fight? It's to make sure that people like Leonard Leo, who comes from a dirty, dark, corrupt past, who is enriching himself at the expense of the rest of us by corrupting the process in which Supreme Court judges are chosen and overwhelming the system, that in league with these people like Elon Musk, who are doing it for other reasons because they don't want to be controlled, they don't want to be regulated, they too, like Donald Trump, want to be above the law. And then the bro culture, of the tech industry that basically does not want to involve women in their field, that does not want to listen to anybody themselves. These kind of cage fighter worshiping, bulked up nerds who have decided that, you know, it's easier to get girls if you're a billionaire and you get a personal trainer and have a private army protecting you. This weird coalition of defunct losers, that's who they all are. That's who Leonard Leo is, a defunct loser clinging at age 50. Bad age, by the way. I'm 72. Bad age, this kind of middle time of your life when you think you know everything. And then you wake up when you're 72 and say, my God, I didn't know anything. But that takes a little wisdom and a little growth. Okay, but having said that, this guest essay in the New York Times today, The Man Behind the End of Roe v. Wade Has Big Plans for America, September 18, by someone I've had wonderful correspondence with via email, Thomas B. Edsall. I think America's leading commentator. If you wanted to know who I choose above everybody, including me, listen to this guy. Interesting little note. When Thomas Edsall wants the opinion of another writer or a famous theologian or a well-known philosopher or a scientist, whomever it may be, guess what? He doesn't just read their books. He can email them because everybody who's anybody knows Thomas B. Edsall. And half the time he's quoting people who write back to him and say, you know, here's what I think in my email. And this article has the same thing in it, if you want to hear the voice of the experts. So, all right, was this a big plug for somebody? Yes. But this is an article you can't meet. The Man Behind the End of Roe v. Wade Has Big Plans for America. You have to understand who Leonard Leo is. You have to understand how he's enriched himself at your expense. You have to understand how he's corrupted the Supreme Court. And by the way, if we Democrats ever get back in power again, we have to appoint more justices to the Supreme Court to break the hold of Opus Dei, a secretive organization on our Supreme Court. Sound extreme? Yep. Well, these are extreme times. My name is Frank Schaeffer.